At 2:47 a.m., I woke up to the sound of silence. A silence so heavy it felt rehearsed, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My children had visited the day before, their smiles brittle, their words rehearsed. They had left behind more than flowers and fruit baskets. They had left the unmistakable scent of decision. By sunrise, I realized the decision was me. Betrayal doesn't scream. It sighs. It hides in the polite way your daughter averts her eyes, the sudden urgency in your son's voice when he says, "It's for your own good, Dad." It was the quiet arrangement behind my back, the way my own children turned my independence into a liability, my memories into excuses. That was the night I stopped being a father and became their burden. They didn't know what they were waking up inside me. They thought they were storing me away, neatly, like an old coat in a closet. But closets have hinges, and hinges creak when they move. Beneath my silence, something ancient and unbroken stirred, a defiance I thought had died with my wife. And so, as the black car rolled up the driveway, headlights cutting across the lawn like blades, I made a promise in the hollow of my chest. If they think they're burying me alive, they'll soon learn that coffins don't hold the living. What my children had just unleashed was not weakness, it was my comeback. The morning after, I sat by the window of my empty house, watching the world move without me. The neighbors waved, unaware of the storm beneath my smile. Boxes were stacked neatly in the hallway, my life reduced to cardboard and tape. My children had decided my story was finished, but they had miscalculated one detail. I was still writing. The nursing home brochure lay open on the table, its glossy images promising safety, companionship, routine. But every staged smile, every sterile hallway pictured, felt like a prison disguised as kindness. I traced the edges of the paper with my fingers, as if by touching it, I could erase the decision already made. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't afraid of being forgotten. I was afraid of never being heard again. As I packed away the photographs of my wife, I whispered to her frame, "They think they've caged me, but you and I both know cages don't hold the stubborn." Her silent smile was the only approval I needed to plan my return. I didn't know yet how, but I knew when. The moment those doors closed behind me, my comeback would begin. But before we go any further into this labyrinth of betrayal, resilience, and the unexpected storm that followed, let me ask you something. Backhand index pointing right, are you ready to walk with me through every twist of this story? If you are, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button so more people discover these stories of survival, and drop a comment below telling me which city and country you're watching from, globe showing Europe, Africa. Your presence here is part of this journey, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Because my children thought they had ended my chapter. They had no idea they were only setting the stage for my greatest one yet. The black sedan pulled away from my driveway, carrying the only people I had ever sworn to protect. My children sat inside, silhouettes framed by tinted glass, their profiles as cold and distant as strangers. I stood on the porch, watching the car shrink against the horizon, knowing I had just witnessed the quietest funeral of all. Not mine, but of their loyalty. Inside the house, their voices still echoed like ghosts. "It's for your own good, Dad. You'll be safer there. We can't keep worrying every day." I replayed their words, each syllable digging into my chest like a shovel striking stone. Safety. Worry. Good. They used those words as shrouds, but underneath was something they dared not name. Convenience. For decades, I had been their shelter. I worked double shifts so they could attend private schools. I refused vacations so I could pay off their college tuitions. I built empires of sacrifice brick by brick. And now, with the flick of a pen, they had declared me obsolete. The nursing home loomed in their plans like an invisible executioner. I had not yet seen it, but I felt its presence in every closed conversation, every whispered phone call. They were preparing me for exile while smiling across the dinner table. Betrayal is never louder than when it hides behind love. That night, I walked through the house in silence. Every corner was a memory. My wife's laughter in the kitchen, the smell of Christmas dinners, the sound of little feet racing up the stairs. The house breathed with me. Yet in a week, I would be stripped of it, reduced to a bed in a hallway lined with others waiting to disappear. My neighbors knew nothing. To them, I was George, the retiree who waved every morning, who fixed fences, who lent tools. But I was already being erased. My children had signed the papers, and once the ink dries, society forgets you faster than it buries you. I considered confronting them, demanding an explanation beyond their practiced pity. But every time I pictured their faces, I saw only the polished confidence of people who believe they are right. Arguing would be like shouting at locked doors. Instead, I began rehearsing silence. Silence, after all, can be sharper than any blade. Days blurred into countdowns. My daughter visited again, bringing soup I didn't ask for. She placed it on the counter, as if feeding a prisoner. I wanted to scream, "This is still my house," but my tongue stayed chained. I wasn't ready to reveal the fire building inside me. Let them think I was beaten. Let them underestimate me. On the eve of my departure, I opened the drawer where my old journals rested. Decades of notes, sketches, plans, records of a man who had never stopped building. My children had forgotten who I was. But I hadn't. As I flipped through the pages, an idea took root, fragile yet unyielding. Maybe this exile wasn't the end. Maybe it was the perfect stage for a comeback. The following morning, when the moving truck arrived to collect my final boxes, I noticed something tucked under the windshield wiper. A sealed envelope with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, almost too familiar. My hands trembled as I tore it open, scanning the first line. And then, just like that, the ground beneath my story shifted forever. The envelope trembled in my hands, as if it knew what it carried. Cream paper, faint lavender scent, and handwriting that made my ribs ache, Eleanor's. My wife's loops and careful crosses had survived her better than any monument. The date in the corner, 10 years earlier, was a fist to the lungs. The first line didn't ask how I was. It said, "If they ever decide for you, it is time to decide for yourself." I read standing up, because sitting felt too much like surrender. "George, I've watched the way fear disguises itself as responsibility in our children. If they move to protect you, it will be to protect themselves. From guilt, from effort, from the mirror of aging. You were never helpless. If that day comes, follow the plan we agreed on in whispers." I didn't remember agreeing. Or maybe grief had erased the ink and left only the paper. The letter became a map. Behind the workbench, the third baseboard. Pry it gently with the paint scraper you never returned to Harold. A brass key. Box 412 at Arlington Mutual. Ask for Helena Cruz. Tell her, violets bend at dusk. She will know you are ready. The last paragraph was pure Eleanor, soft knife, sharpened mercy. They will call it love, how they box you. Call it what it is, and walk out. Movers thumped down the hallway, carting my life into rectangles. I slid into the garage like a thief in my own biography. The workbench had the same coffee rings, the same oil slick constellations. Third baseboard. The scraper bit wood. The wood surrendered. The brass key winked at me like an old accomplice. Somewhere behind me, a man called, "Sir, do you want these photo albums in the truck?" I lied without blinking. "Leave them. I'll carry those." The safety deposit box opened with a sound I felt in my teeth. Inside, a small ledger, a thumb drive, and documents with Eleanor's neat tabs. A revocable living trust bearing my name as sole trustee, updated after her diagnosis, moving the house and the majority of our accounts into a protected structure. A new medical directive. A notarized letter revoking any power of attorney not originating from Helena's office. My chest burned with something brighter than rage. Proof. The ledger was worse. Entries in Eleanor's hand, each a candle lighting a darker room. Notes about our eldest's failed startup and his quiet loans. Our daughter's marriage and the storms beneath its polished surface. A mention of Camila, my daughter-in-law, who had insisted on helping with my online banking after Eleanor's funeral. Dates. Amounts. Screenshots printed and initialed. The pattern was a thread. The thread led to my children. Not monsters, just mortals wobbling toward convenience. My phone buzzed. Dad. My daughter's voice, sugared with fatigue. The facility called. They can take you tomorrow morning instead of Friday. That's good, right? I watched the brass key glint on the banker's mat. My throat remembered how to perform. Of course, sweetheart. Whatever eases your mind. She exhaled relief, mistaking my calm for consent. Love you. I ended the call and finally named the thing inside my chest. It wasn't anger. It was velocity. Helena Cruz answered on the second ring. Cruz and Baines. I said the phrase Eleanor had left me like a lit match. Violets bend at dusk. Paper rustled, a chair scraped. When Helena spoke again, her voice carried a decade of preparation. Mr. Hale, I've been expecting this call for 10 years. If you can come now, we can put the walls back where they belong. 30 minutes later, rideshare air conditioning hummed like a rehearsed alibi. Helena's office smelled of lemon oil and litigation. She slid the trust across the desk. Your wife was brilliant and, frankly, unsentimental. This instrument springs if anyone attempts to institutionalize you without judicial review. It freezes discretionary transfers, appoints an independent physician for capacity evaluations, and triggers forfeiture clauses for any heir who acts in bad faith. We recorded a statement. She filed revocations. Stop payments went in like stitches. One more thing, she said. We let them move you. Then we opened the trap. Dusk bent across my street when the car dropped me home. The front door was ajar, the kind of open that denies accidents. I stepped inside to a hush that wasn't mine. A drawer side shut in the study. I set my keys down carefully, the sound a flare. A figure turned, face half-shadowed, a silver ring flashing a serpent. Not my son. Not any honest debt. Old man, he said softly, gloved hand lifting. Where's the thumb drive? Cold metal nudged my spine. The house exhaled. And then the lights went out. The darkness was total, swallowing walls and memories alike. My pulse hammered so loud I feared it would give me away. The man's breath was steady, professional, like someone who had rehearsed fear out of his lungs long ago. Cold steel pressed harder against my back, urging me forward. Sit, he whispered, and the single word carried more weight than any threat. My chair groaned under me as I lowered myself, the leather sighing like it knew secrets. He moved with economy, every step a proof of training. This was not a burglar. This was a message. The glow of his phone lit half his face, a stranger, mid-30s, eyes flat as winter lakes. Your wife was careful, he said, fingers gliding across the phone screen. Too careful. That ledger, those files. You don't understand how dangerous paper can be in the wrong hands. I swallowed the truth like poison. I didn't just understand, I had lived my life with ledgers. Numbers tell stories sharper than knives. And Eleanor had carved a masterpiece. He demanded the thumb drive, voice never rising, never breaking. I kept my gaze steady, letting silence fill the cracks. Silence unnerves men who expect quick surrender. He leaned closer, serpent ring catching the faint light. Old man, don't mistake patience for mercy. Before I could answer, headlights swept across the window. My son's car. Tires crunching gravel, doors slamming. The intruder stiffened, gun shifting from my chest to the door. His curse was low, almost tender. Too soon. In a blink, he vanished into the kitchen shadows, leaving behind the smell of sweat and cold metal. The front door opened. Dad! My son called, voice casual, careless. I sat frozen, my pulse still in the stranger's grip. Did my children know him? Or were they the reason he was here? And then, from the kitchen, the unmistakable click of a back door unlocking. My son's footsteps echoed in the hallway, casual, unhurried, as though nothing in the world was amiss. I forced my hands to steady on the armrest, masking the tremor left by the gun. Dad? He called again, closer now, his voice carrying that practiced warmth that no longer fooled me. I glanced toward the kitchen. The back door swayed slightly ajar, a whisper of night air leaking into the house. Whoever that intruder was, he'd slipped out clean. But he had left behind something worse than his presence: doubt. My son stepped into the room, jacket slung over one shoulder, smile rehearsed. "I came by to see if you needed help packing for tomorrow." His eyes flickered to the desk. Too quickly. I caught it. That glance wasn't innocent. I asked him about the envelope, testing waters. His reaction was flawless, a mask polished over years of practice. He shrugged, laughed even, as if the question were absurd. But there was a flicker, small, fleeting, but real. His jaw clenched before the laugh came. That tiny fracture told me everything. He knew more than he should. Dinner that night was a stage play. My daughter joined us, talking about weather and traffic as if those things mattered. Her eyes, too, betrayed her. They were restless, darting toward the kitchen door, away from mine. They shared something between them, something I wasn't meant to read. When she excused herself to take a call, I leaned forward across the table. "Who was in the house before you got here?" I asked. My son's fork froze halfway to his mouth. For the first time, he looked afraid. Not of me, but of the question. He placed the fork down slowly, carefully, like a man laying a weapon on the ground. "Dad," he said, voice low, "there are things you don't understand. Things Mom started, and they didn't end when she passed." Before I could press him, the window behind us shattered. Glass rained across the table. A brick skidded onto the floor, wrapped in paper and twine. My son's face went pale as milk. On the note, scrawled in ink still wet, were 6 words that froze the blood in my veins. "They won't protect you this time." The brick sat on the floor like a verdict. My son and I stared at it, neither willing to touch it first. His lips moved soundlessly, a prayer or a curse, before he finally tore the twine loose. The note slid free, jagged handwriting crawling across the paper like it had been written in haste, or in fear. "They know what you hold. They know who you are. And they are coming for both." My daughter returned just as he folded the message shut. She took one look at our faces and knew. "It started, hasn't it?" Her voice cracked. Not surprise. Recognition. My blood iced. I demanded answers. At first, silence was their shield, but silence cracks under a father's fury. My son spoke first, reluctant, words spilling like secrets dragged from a locked chest. "Mom wasn't just protecting you, Dad. She was protecting us. The trust, the accounts, the files, they're not just inheritance. They're leverage. And people are willing to kill for them." My daughter's eyes brimmed with a truth she had carried too long. "We tried to move you to the home, not to abandon you, but to hide you, to keep you away from this." She gestured at the shattered window, at the brick, at the fear filling the room. "But they found you anyway." The ground shifted beneath me. For years, I thought betrayal wore my children's faces. But what if it was desperation instead? What if Eleanor had woven them into a web they never chose, leaving them to guard a secret too heavy for anyone? I opened the ledger again, Eleanor's handwriting glowing in lamplight. Beside every number and date, there were initials. Not just family, politicians, businessmen, names that didn't belong in a widow's quiet journal. Each entry wasn't just financial. It was evidence. A map of corruption stretching beyond our walls. The phone rang. Unknown number. Against instinct, I answered. A voice rasped through static. "Mr. Hale, if you want your children alive, bring the drive to the river by midnight." Then silence, heavy and absolute. My son's knuckles whitened around the note. My daughter clutched her chest, tears tracing silent paths. For the first time in a decade, they both looked at me not as a burden, but as the only weapon they had left. Midnight was 3 hours away, and somewhere in the shadows, the serpent ring was waiting. The city slept under a broken moon as I drove toward the river. My children sat in the back seat, silent, their faces pale maps of fear. The thumb drive rested in my coat pocket, a weight heavier than any stone. 3 hours had felt like 3 decades. Every tick of the clock was a drumbeat leading us here. The road narrowed into cracked asphalt. Factories hunched on either side, their windows hollow eyes staring down at us. The river smelled of rust and secrets. I pulled into the shadows beneath an abandoned overpass. Midnight breathed against my neck. Headlights flared in the distance. One car, then another. A procession of predators, engines snarling low. They boxed us in neatly, like they'd done it 100 times before. From the lead vehicle stepped a man whose presence sliced the night open, serpent ring glinting, voice smooth as oil. "You've brought it," he said, not asking but declaring. His men fanned out, shadows with guns. He smiled at my children. "Good. Because if you hadn't, I would have taken them first." My daughter shivered. My son's fists clenched, but his courage was useless against barrels of steel. I held the drive up, letting the moon catch its silver. His eyes gleamed with hunger, the kind that devours kingdoms. "Hand it over," he ordered. But Eleanor's letter burned in my mind. "If they ever decide for you, it is time to decide for yourself." I hadn't come this far to trade one coffin for another. My hand hovered in the air, seconds stretching into eternities. And then, from the dark riverbank, another voice shattered the night. "Not so fast." A spotlight snapped on, blinding the Serpent Man's crew. Figures emerged, armed, precise, moving like they owned the shadows. The serpent cursed, guns snapping toward me. I froze, caught between 2 wolves circling the same prey. The leader of the newcomers stepped forward, badge flashing faintly in the light. "Mr. Hale, we've been waiting for you. Hand us the drive, and you might just live through tonight." 2 enemies. 1 drive. 1 choice. The clock struck midnight. The badge glinted under the moonlight, but something about it felt wrong. Too clean, too rehearsed, like an actor's prop. The Serpent Man laughed, a dry hiss that curled in the night. "Federal agents. Don't be fooled, old man. They want the drive as much as I do." The newcomers spread in formation, weapons raised. The serpent's crew mirrored them. The air thickened, ready to ignite. My children clung to the shadows, their eyes wide with the terror of pawns, realizing the board was never theirs. I stood between predators, the drive burning a hole in my palm. Every instinct screamed to choose a side, but Eleanor's letter whispered louder. "Trust no one but the truth." That was when I noticed. The serpent's eyes weren't on me, but on the man with the badge. Recognition. Hatred. Old rivals circling the same treasure. "Last chance, Hale," the badgeman barked. "Give it to us and walk away." His voice cracked, not with nerves but with greed. The serpent lunged first, gun flashing. The night erupted. Bullets ripped across the asphalt, sparks dancing like fireflies of war. My son shoved me down, shielding me with a courage I hadn't expected to see again. My daughter screamed as glass shattered around us. 2 factions tore at each other, metal and flesh colliding, men dropping into pools of their own ambition. I crawled toward the car, every breath searing my lungs. The drive slipped in my grip, slick with sweat. A body fell inches from me, eyes wide in frozen surprise. Above the chaos, the serpent's voice roared. "The drive, Hale, or they die." My children were dragged into the open, guns at their temples, tears streaking their faces. The world narrowed into a single impossible choice: surrender everything Eleanor had hidden, or watch the only pieces of her left be executed before me. And then, just as my hand lifted, the river itself answered. A boat's engine thundered from the darkness, its spotlight cutting across the melee. A familiar silhouette stood at the bow, steady as stone, hair whipping in the wind. My throat closed. Impossible. Unthinkable. It was Eleanor. The spotlight from the boat carved the night in 2. My heart faltered. The silhouette was unmistakable. Eleanor, hair swept by the wind, standing as if the last decade had been nothing but a pause. The serpent froze mid-command, his men lowering their weapons by instinct. My children gasped, clinging to each other, their grief resurrected into confusion. I wanted to run, to believe, to let the years collapse into her arms. But reason clawed at me. Eleanor had been buried. I had lowered her casket myself. The figure stepped closer, voice cutting through gunfire's echo. "George, trust the letter. Finish what we started." Her tone, steady, commanding, intimate, was hers. Yet something was fractured, mechanical, like a recording layered onto flesh. The badgeman shouted, "She's not real. A decoy. They're using her image to break you." But his desperation betrayed him. He was afraid, not of the woman, but of what she represented. The serpent raised his weapon toward her. Enough games. Before he could fire, the woman moved with precision, too sharp, too perfect. A gun flashed from her coat, bullets tearing through his crew with surgical accuracy. Men fell like dominoes, screams drowned by the roar of the river. Chaos swallowed the docks once more. I shielded my children, dragging them behind a rusted container. My mind split in two, the Eleanor I loved, and the phantom waging war before me. Was she alive, hidden all these years inside shadows and secrets? Or was I staring at the cruelest trick of all, my wife reborn as someone else's weapon? The serpent's blood spread dark across the ground. His final words crawled through the chaos, "You'll never know whose side she's on." And then the woman turned, her eyes locking with mine. They were Eleanor's eyes. But behind them, something colder flickered, something I had never known. When the last gunshot faded, silence returned heavier than before. The docks smelled of iron and riverweed, of endings. My children clung to me, no longer protectors, no longer betrayers, just fragile flesh bound by blood and survival. The woman approached, lowering her weapon. Up close, the truth was unbearable. It was Eleanor's face, her voice, her scent, but marked by scars time had never carved. "You were never meant to know," she whispered, placing the drive back into my palm. "But now you must finish it." I realized then, survival is not about winning or losing, not even about knowing the whole truth. It is about standing, breathing, choosing, when every force demands your silence. My children had put me in a home, thinking it would end me. Instead, they awakened the part of me that refuses graves. And so, as the river carried the dead away, I looked at my family, broken, frightened, but still mine, and knew the comeback had already begun. Because no matter the secrets, no matter the betrayals, one truth burned brighter than all. I was not done living.